Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Episode 72 of the Last Round Podcast. A different voice hosting today. No Danny Z, as he has to go to work during this coronavirus pandemic. But we're lucky to have a special guest today, Marcos Villegas, the founder of and host of Fight Hub TV and PBC historian and unofficial ringside scorer. Welcome, Marcos.
Hey, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
I'm sure the coronavirus is stopping you going to work at the minute. You can't go to the gyms and
stopping everybody from going to work, man. This thing is man, it's just crazy. Like everything, it's affected the whole entire world, you know?
It's crazy. My brother actually just got told today back in England that he has to quarantine for 12 weeks. So he's got 3 months of Netflix.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all doing right now is watching Netflix and just, we got all the time in the world now, you know? I just hope people take this staying inside, and if they do go outside, staying away from people and gathering in large groups seriously, you know?
It's kind of worked out well for us because obviously we get to get a hold of you for a quick interview because normally I'm sure you'd be bouncing around California and Vegas doing interviews. So
yeah. No, that is true. You know, I know we've tried to make this happen before, and just my schedule has been a little bit hectic with the shows that, you know, Fox has and all the other shows. But no, yeah, I'm happy we're finally getting to do this. But yeah, this pandemic is man, it's tough, man. But we all gotta, you know, sacrifice for the greater good.
Well, let's jump straight to it. So obviously you started Fight Hub. So does boxing run in the family?
No, not at all. I'd always been a fan of combat sports, boxing, MMA, kickboxing. I always liked all of that stuff growing up, and I wrestled when I was a kid. So you know, I was always interested in it and a fan of it, but I never thought I would ever get to work in it. To be honest, it was not my goal to want to work in this industry or do anything related to it, or would I've ever imagined ever that I'd be working in boxing full time.
So how and why did you start Fight Hub?
I started Fight Hub as, I guess, you know, it naturally came up because I was doing marketing work for an MMA company, and they were putting on a fight over here in Southern California. And when I was going through the marketing plan, because, you know, I went to school for marketing and advertising, I had told them that we needed some sort of digital content to promote the event, and so that people could get to know who their fighters were. Thing is, we didn't have the budget to hire somebody, so they just said, hey, well, can you just go ahead and do this? So, you know, the footage that they wouldn't need or any of the funny stuff that I filmed with the fighters that were participating in the fights, I kept. And then it was good content. So I just one day decided to upload it to YouTube without even naming the channel Fight Hub. I didn't even know what I was going to name it. I think I had it under my name. And I kept doing that. And I remember, you know, 3 weeks later, I got a clip with Bob Sapp kicking the heavy bag that went super viral, got 1 million hits. This was within 3 weeks of starting the channel. And I sat there and I thought, you know what, this isn't normal. There could be something here. So that's when I kind of did a powwow, was going through names that I could name the channel. And I named it Fight Hub. And that's pretty much how it started. Was that I wouldn't say it was an accident, but it kind of was, because there was never any intention to be like, you know what, you know, I want something to give the fans or anything. It was just me like, hey, this is cool stuff, I'm going to put it up. And I just happened to get a viral video very early on.
There always seems to be some debate who was first, IFL TV, Ellie Sekbach, Seconds Out, Fight Hub. Can you give us
Yeah,
any?
well, I know exactly who was first because, obviously even though I didn't start when YouTube first started, I was pretty much in the very, very early days of YouTube. And there was already when I got in and made the channel, there was only two other channels that were out there. It was myself, Fight Hype, and Ellie were the only two. And then, a year later came IFL, but they weren't doing boxing. They were doing entertainment stuff. And Fight Hype wasn't putting out much stuff either. And Ellie was still doing like basketball and some boxing. So, I know it's kind of murky as to who came when, but, very early on, it was us three. And at that point, I didn't even know who these people were. I didn't know who Ellie was. I didn't know who Fight Hype was. I just started, doing after the Bob Sapp video. I just started doing the interviews because, well, one, I was trying to help out the MMA fight that was going on, but two, I thought it was really fun to go ahead and do it. So I was already like just doing it without even knowing what the hell I was doing and what these other people were doing.
Obviously, when I knew you were coming on, I looked back at the channel and I saw the first ever uploaded video on Fight Hub was a video of you and Reggie Warren, the MMA fight, having a drink off.
Yeah. That was our first video, and I got like 30,000 views, which is crazy. Me having a beer. And it's funny because Reggie Warren is no longer around. I think the closest thing to Reggie Warren now is the Schmo, and he had a very similar approach to what he had this character called Reggie Warren. That was like this hick hillbilly that would interview people and make funny videos. And I found him at a comedy club that was roasting MMA fighters. And yeah, we did that video, and yeah, that was the first one that I put up. So like I said, I had no idea what the heck I was doing at that time.
The Bob Sapp video is now at 2.9 million viewers.
Yeah. It's crazy because I'm just holding the bag, but it's just funny because he's kicking the crap out of it, and I'm like flailing around. He got this 330-pound jacked Bob Sapp when he's all on Mexican supplements or whatever he's on, because at that point he was on just about everything. And he's just whacking the bag. I think he was, I want to say a K1 fight at that point.
When you first started, were the boxers and MMA fighters and gyms, were they open to actually having you there?
What was that?
When you first started Fight Hub and went to the gyms, were the boxers and MMA fighters and gyms like quite open to having you there filming?
Oh yeah, man. They loved it because there wasn't a lot of people doing that. Especially on YouTube. There was others, at that time there was, on the boxing side, not so much. You had, maybe Max Boxing and Boxing Scene do it. On the MMA side, you had Fight Magazine, Fighters Only, MMA Worldwide, but it wasn't a lot. So, I would just show up and be like, hey, can I get an interview? And they would be like, yeah, man, let's do it. They were excited about that because, they wanted the exposure, because a lot of the times no one would ever come and visit them, So I remember, very, very rarely did I ever get told no to an interview. And I would just show up at the gyms unannounced. I would just show up and be like, hey, I'm so-and-so. I was wondering if I can do an interview with you, and they would always say yes. So I never met any resistance there on that end. It wasn't until on the MMA side, when the UFC started getting really big, where sometimes they started now asking that. But as a whole with boxing, no, never.
'Cause most boxers really, even now, it's more exposure for them. It's free advertising. So I'm sure you get boxers actually reach out wanting interviews.
Oh, yeah, all the time, and like I mentioned, very rarely have I ever seen a fighter say no to an interview. I think they like it also as well because, they're in camp, and camps, very boring, very rigid routine over and over and over again, and it drives them nuts. So I think, doing interviews, doing media kind of, helps refresh their mind and their mentality, like you're speaking with other people, because they're seeing the same people day in and day out. So they kind of want something different as well to kind of distract them and just keep them fresh mentally.
You posted an interview recently with Roger Mayweather and said you had to lie to get into the Mayweather v. Mosley Presser.
Yeah, I did. That was very early on, and I'd already created Fight Hub, and it was still very small, and I wasn't getting credentials to go in anywhere. So I remember I checked in, and the guy asked me like, "Hey, what outlet are you with?" And I lied. I said I was like with the magazine, and he's like, "Oh, do you have a business card?" And I was like, no, I gave him out, but I'm here, like I'm not lying." And the guy like looked me dead in the eye, and he's like, "You better not be lying. Are you lying?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "If I catch that you're lying, you're never getting into an event ever again." I was like, "No, man, I'm not lying." And he's like, and then like a swarm of people like swarmed him to get in, other media people, because I had gotten there early. And I could tell he was like overwhelmed, and he's like, just go in here, and that's how I got into the press conference.
How times have changed. Like now, I'm sure you're probably one of the first ones who gets credentialed.
Yeah. Oh, you'd be surprised though. A lot of us that have been working these events, especially the big events, we never know where they're gonna seat us. We know we're gonna get a credential, but I even still wonder to this day sometimes, what kind of seat am I gonna get at these events, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because I cover just about everything. You would think, common courtesy, but boxing's a funny business.
When you first started, and I suppose even now, was anyone you were nervous to interview?
Oh, all the time. I was, my nervousness of interviewing people didn't go away until, sometime in. Obviously, the more I interviewed somebody, the more comfortable I would get with them, or the more I would do it, the more comfortable I would get. But no, yeah, I would get nervous. The first time I was on camera, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't nervous with the people that I already interacted with, not over interacted, but interacted with. But I remember the first time I interviewed Dana White, I was extremely nervous. I was like sweating, like I had like butterflies, like I was like, and like same goes with with Roger. When I posted that interview, I was super nervous. I'd never seen Roger before in person, and now I'm seeing him and I'm face to face with him, and I keep thinking to myself like, don't mess up. Asking legit questions. And the same with like Floyd, that same day I interviewed Floyd, he gave me like 6 minutes, and I didn't prepare any questions for Floyd because I didn't think I was going to get Floyd at all, and we're going back and forth with questions, and like he put me on the spot with some questions, and I was just like, I'm like, don't freeze up, ask him this, ask him that, and luckily it came out well. But yeah, it didn't go away completely till sometime in, but now it's I don't even get nervous at all now, to be honest.
When you go in, do you normally plan the questions, or do you just feed off the answers they give you?
It depends. I'm more of like the hybrid school. There's a school of thought that says, prepare your questions so you can kind of navigate what type of conversation you want to have, and others just go there and see where the conversation takes you. I'm more in the middle. Make sure to ask the questions that are the most important that fans want to hear, but see where it goes. It makes for like a more natural and organic conversation. But I do still do my prep work. But honestly, lately I haven't been preparing questions. I've just been going in and just seeing where it ends up. Sometimes I kick myself in the butt because it's like, man, like I forgot to ask this. Other times, I've noticed that a lot more of their personality comes out, and it's a lot more natural conversation with them.
Over the last 10, 11 years since you've been doing Fight Up, what's the most memorable interviews you've done? Obviously, you've got the famous one with Angel Garcia flipping out, even the recent one with Bob Arum just getting up and walking away.
Yeah. A lot of us take that as a badge of honor. It's funny. If you talk to like top rank employees, they'll tell you that like if you haven't been yelled at Bob, that means he doesn't care about you. So, there's been a lot, but I think the most memorable ones were with the fighter that's not even really well known to boxing guys. And it was back when I was covering MMA, a fighter by the name of Antonio McKee, who ended up fighting in the UFC. He only had one fight though, but the interviews that I did with him, they're hilarious. They were so funny. I never knew where they would go. and then make really, really big headlines. A lot of people like tuning into my interviews with them, and it's just really, really good chemistry with them. And I think, the, not a, I want to say a significant part of our success early on was the interviews that I did with them, because I would do an interview and all the websites would pick it up. We'd follow it up. And it got to a point where I like to say that we had a small part in him getting noticed to be able to go into the UFC when he finally got a UFC contract, because of the content that we always put out of him. My interviews with Tone were probably some of the most memorable. Honestly, Bob Arum, I love talking to Bob Arum, because when he gets pissed off, like, I don't take it personal, because I don't know, it's just, he's an old man. He doesn't care anymore. He doesn't have any filters. So there's just so many, man. There's so many, but those are the two that really pop to my mind off the top of my head.
Any fighters or celebrities that you know for a fact track the biggest views for Fight Hub?
What was that?
Any fighters or celebrities that you know, once you do an interview, are going to attract big views?
Well, obviously, it depends on what's trending. I think that's with anything. You see anybody on YouTube who's a YouTube content creator outside of this, they make videos based on what's trending in the world, what's trending on Twitter, and what's trending on YouTube. Same thing goes for the boxing space. If there's a lot of chatter about so-and-so fighting so-and-so, if those two fighters are involved in that fight, they're going to do well. Or someone talking about that fight is going to do well. So, it's really based on what's trending. And also, too, boxing's a global sport. So you'll be surprised that some of these fighters that aren't super well known still get like a good amount of traffic, because they have a huge international following. Like that Turkish guy, Envy Yildirim. When he fought against Durrell, I'm seeing videos that we posted of him, and they're doing really, really well. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, nobody knows who this guy is here in the U.S. But in Turkey, he's like their only well-known boxer, and he did really, really well. The same goes with a lot of guys like Manny Pacquiao, the fighters from Africa, from Ghana, when they had their moment. So it just shows you and puts in perspective how really a global sport boxing is, and that it thrives even outside of the major epicenters of the sport, like the United States, Mexico, and the UK.
You just touched on, obviously, it's a global sport, and so obviously it's hard for you to cover multiple events. How many staff do you have that help you out with Fight Hub?
Yeah, we got a good amount of like part-time staff that are located here in the U.S. and then on the UK and Mexico and the Philippines as well. But it took a long time to get there, and we're still self-funded by me. It's still independent, and it's a little bit harder because you're having companies come in now, like the broadcasters that are going into the YouTube space now and stuff. So it's definitely made it a lot more competitive, and then also other people seeing the success of channels like me and where I've gotten to, and seeing like, hey, if you can do it, why can't I? You got a lot of people coming into the YouTube space as well. So, it's competition is a little bit more harder now, definitely, because you got a lot more content creators out there that are empowered now, seeing the success that I like to say the big three, the original three did. So it's always a changing game, but I wish we had big backing funding from a huge company, but boxing here in the U.S. is still growing, it's still niche. It's not like it's American football or basketball or hockey. Sponsors and companies are still a little hesitant to go ahead and go in all in on it.
Could you just explain to us the life of a YouTube media? Because I'm sure everyone thinks that it's glamorous. You're just rubbing shoulders with boxers and celebrities. So could you just kind of break down like how a fight week would work for you?
Man, these fight weeks it's a lot of work, man. A lot of people don't realize that we work like 10, 12 hours on these days. We have to report to, whatever event they have, like at 10:30, 11, and we don't stop working till like 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, very the athletes. I would say that's the smallest part, because there's times where we only get like 3 minutes, 4 minutes with these guys, the biggest part is because we get so much stuff, especially like a channel like mine where, I have my interviews and then I have another videographer that's getting stuff too. There's a lot of stuff that happens, and when they're putting us in these scrums, a lot of like good sound bites come out of that, so it's a lot of editing, a lot of prep work. At times you can't even prep because you're so busy. By the time you're done editing, you're tired, you just want to chill because you're just exhausted. And you still got to go ahead and prep your questions for the next day. So that's a majority, of it is doing that. And also, talking to you'd be surprised, majority of us still have to hustle to get our stuff. It's not like we're given interviews, we still got to hound their PR people and be like, hey, can I get so-and-so? I haven't gotten so-and-so, and really follow up to go ahead and get our stuff, because, they're doing so much. The fighters during that fight week, especially with the big mega fights, that, it's tough to get them. So, it's always a grind. It's always a hustle for us.
You touched on, obviously, you just have to grab people whenever you can. What is the strangest place you've ever had to interview somebody? Because we've seen, Michelle Joy Phelps interview Tyson Fury in bed.
Yeah, I've glad to say I've never interviewed a fighter in bed. I'm happy and proud to go ahead and say that. I got to think, man. I got to think if there's ever been a really weird place. I don't think there's ever been a really, really weird place. I tend to try to be proactive when there's not fight weeks, to go and get stuff at their gyms, or their houses, or like at an open spot. The reason why I don't like doing interviews in fighters' homes or in places like their rooms is because I think it kind of handicaps the journalists doing the interview, like in control of the situation. Like there's a lot of variables there. Say you ask them a tough question that they don't like, they could tell you, hey, you're not leaving my place until you give me the tape, until you give me that card and you delete the footage. And, I was taught that don't put yourself in a compromising position like that unless, you're there with the crew that could support you and get you out of there. Because a lot of the times it's just, the journalist, the videographer, and then the athlete as well. So I don't think there's ever been a really, really like strange, out of the ordinary place that I've ever done an interview. But it's because I don't like doing interviews in those situations, because then I feel like it compromises my position, that I can't ask tough questions. Because, okay, just imagine someone coming into your home asking you like a tough question that you don't like. You're going to get pissed off. Like, you're not going to want them to come back to your house. They're in your house. And if you wanted, you can be like, yo, you're not leaving here until you give me that footage, because I don't want that clip getting out. So that's why on a personal level, I've tend to avoid situations like that.
Without naming names, have you ever had fighters, try to stop you from leaving, get anything, or ever had blowback from videos that you've uploaded?
Oh, yeah, of course. I've had fighters call me and tell me, hey, don't upload that, or hey, can you take that down, or like, hey, can you please not put that up, and stuff like that. It happens to a lot of us, and you got to explain it to them like, look, you said this. I didn't say this. I'm not putting words in your mouth. Like, I'm quoting you verbatim. This is what you said. And honestly, you really got to stick to your guns to keep your journalistic credibility. Other people are different. Other people will play the game and take it down to get, I scratch your back, you scratch mine type of thing. Like, okay, I'll take this down, but you owe me a gimme. From schooling and where I come from, that's a big no-no. That's a matter of ethics there. But yeah, no, I've gotten phone calls, and even the UFC has called me at times to tell me like, hey, why do I have a certain video up, or why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? So yeah, no, it certainly has happened to me.
Any advice you'd give to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps and, start a YouTube page?
I would say, have patience. This didn't happen overnight for me. I didn't start making money on YouTube till like 5 years in. Like money where like I could make it into a part time. You know, everybody's different. Everybody's journey is different. And don't judge. Don't look at other people's success. And you ask yourself like, well, why isn't it working for me? Like, look at so and so, they're getting this, and that. Everybody has their own different journey. And as a YouTube content creator, this takes time, and you got to build a subscriber base. You got to build loyalty to your brand. You got to be consistent with the content that you upload, so that people know to go to your channel at a certain day or time for content, and that it's not an easy, like, don't come in thinking it's easy money or you're going to be successful right away. No, that's not how it works.
You also are the unofficial ringside scorer and PBC historian. How did that come about?
It's interesting how that came about. So it actually happened because of Al Bernstein, who was one of my mentors. I used to do work for Al Bernstein when there was an online site called the Boxing Channel. And he actually referred me to Steve Farhood because Steve Farhood was looking for help when PBC first was created and they were all on these networks. He needed somebody to help research notes for the broadcasters, but also score fights for the telecast. So he just randomly reached me because I think at that point I was looking for work, and I had reached out to Al asking like, hey, do you know of anything? And just by chance, I was like, actually, Steve was asking me the other day if I knew anybody about this thing. So Steve just said, hey, this is what it entails. You're making notes for the broadcasters and you have to score the fights. And I was like, Steve, I've never scored a fight for TV before. And he's like, well, you've been to hundreds of fights, haven't you? I'm like, yeah. It's like, you know how to score a fight? I'm like, of course, but I've never done it for TV. And he's like, it's not that hard, bro. And I'm like, okay. Like, all right, well, he's like, I've seen your tweets. Like, your scores are on the same line as mine. I trust you. And that's pretty much how it started. Was that way. The first few shows, I wasn't really nervous. I was more, I want to say, looking for validation through my co-hosts and my peers, because I knew that there was going to be a lot of the fighter talent were just like, who the heck is this guy? Like, what? Marcos? How's Marcos scoring? Like, what does this guy know about boxing and stuff like that? And I think when you look at the early telecasts, a lot of my scores reflected with the judges, and I got their respect. And I knew as soon as I got their respect, I got the production's respect. And the gig went away from me, because PBC started disappearing from the networks. And then when this new deal came, they reached out back to me and I don't want to say reoffered because it's a different position now, but they said like, hey, we know that you were doing this before, and we want to go and bring you in for the FS1s, which naturally turned into the Foxes and the pay-per-view. So it's a split between me and Larry Hazard, who's the commissioner in New Jersey. But yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. But I also was asking judges how they see fights. I went to Mexico to a WBC convention to see how they scored fights. I'm always asking the judges, like, how are they seeing fights and everything like that. So I'm always constantly learning as well.
We had this question sent in, and I think obviously you saw it on Twitter. How would you fix the post scoring, and should judges be interviewed afterwards to answer questions on the way they scored the bout?
Yeah, so how would I fix scoring? I think when there's a terrible score, and I don't think the commissions do this, I think there should be like a review period on that judge and their scores, where they take them off of shows, they review the past fights they've done, and if they're seeing something completely different than what the fans are seeing, what their peers are seeing, they should not be allowed to score fights anymore. They should be let go. It's with anything. It's you given a bad performance, you get let go, or you're not allowed to judge fights anymore. So I think that's a big thing. I think We've seen that Nevada not do that with some certain judges that have scored fights. I don't know how they scored them, the way they scored them, and there's no sort of internal review that's transparent. There's no, they don't, they've been in there for a long. And the other thing too, as these judges get older, and just in general, any person that gets older is not as sharp as they were before. A lot of the times, like an athlete, they get to a certain age, they're not in their prime anymore. You could say the same thing with judges. They get to a certain point where like they're not judging how they used to maybe 10, 15 years earlier, and they got to let them go. So I think that's one way the commissions could do that. The other way is I'm not a fan of the judges not having a TV screen in front of them. I think, a lot of the bad scores that we get could be fixed if they had a TV monitor in front of them, because a lot of the times, because the judges are in 3 different positions, they're seeing the back of a fighter and they're not seeing punches being landed, or the ref gets in their way and it's impairing their vision and they miss a lot of shots. So I could see why we're getting at times these scorecards that you're like, what the heck? What is that guy watching? It's because they're in compromised vantage points. Like the systems is already skewed for error. So if they had a TV screen in front of them, I think that would fix a lot of the things. I know people have suggested to put them in a room where they're seeing the fight, but I think if you put a TV screen in front of them, we'll get a lot better scores from the judges as well.
What's your opinion on moving to, say, 5 judges, so one bad scorecard is kind of watered out by the other 4?
You know what? I don't know, because you think, okay, maybe it's too many chefs in the kitchen. You have 5 people, and those 5 people can have wildly different interpretations of how a fight should be scored, because it is subjective, honestly, to how you're taught and how you see a fight. And if you see fights in certain judges, you get a feeling of what they see, and so usually it's either one judge that favors the guy that's coming forward who's trying to cause damage, or the other judge likes someone who's point fighting. It really comes out of those two. So I don't know if we need more judges. I think if they just had better tools at their disposal, we get better cards. And I think a big thing would be TV monitors for them to look at the fight, because at the end of the day, the TV is the best angle for the fight, because you got like 3 cameras on that. So you're not missing anything. You're getting the best view. Even though the judges are ringside, sometimes their view is obstructed. So I think a monitor, it solves a lot of those problems.
How do you personally break down and score a fight?
I look at it, it's kind of like a scale. That's how I look at it, and I'm scoring jabs, I'm scoring power punches. Obviously if someone lands 2 jabs and someone lands a flush straight, I'm going to tilt the scale towards them. So it's a scale. And like the WBC has a certain system like that too, where it's kind of like the equivalent of like a health bar in a video game, kind of almost in a way, but they do they call it a mental computer, where you have a bar and it's blue and red corner, it's in the middle. And based on the amount of damaging punches landed, is whoever lands the most damaging punches or the most scoring punches that are doing the damage, because their main criteria is damage. The main point of a fight is to hurt your opponent. So whoever's doing damaging punches gets a move on that scale. And I've actually adopted like a hybrid of that. And I like the results that I'm getting. 9 times out of 10, I don't question myself as to who wins a round when they're close rounds based on that. So that's how I'm seeing it, and a lot of people have asked, like, well, what blows you score and all that. I don't want to say I'm a stickler, but like, to me, the jab means a lot, because in the amateur system, a jab scores points. Obviously you got to balance it out, because if a guy's just jabbing the crap out of somebody for the whole round, but they're not very effective. And when I mean effective, they're not doing a lot of damage, but they're scoring points. Or a guy that lands like 2 bombs, you can't discredit the guy that's doing work those whole 3 minutes, which is the guy jabbing. So I think a lot of times we get into that, where someone says like, "Oh, the jab wasn't doing anything." This other guy, when he landed some big punches, he should get the round. And I'm of the thing like, no, this guy was working those whole 3 minutes, scoring points, jabbing, clean, effective punching. That's the biggest criteria in judging a fight: clean, effective punching. A jab is a clean, effective punch if it lands and it makes your head snap back. So that's more or less how I see it.
What are your thoughts on open scoring, which was recently trialed in Invicta MMA in Phoenix?
I think there's some good and some bad, because, the argument is, if a fighter finds out they're like way ahead, they're not going to fight like as if there's urgency there, and they're going to kind of coast it, and it could lead to a very boring fight. And the other side is, a fighter finds out they're way behind, they're going to be more urgent to go ahead and make something happen. I know the WBC has open scoring when the commissions elect to do it, and they advise the corners what the score is in round 4 and round 8. I guess I'm in the middle. I'm not neither for it or against it. I think it can be good and it can be bad. So I would rather have it where it's at, where they don't really do open scoring. I know there's a big uproar in MMA right now about open scoring, but it's not always a good thing, because, you have a fighter that has won every single round, and they know they're up big, and they've been the one pressuring, and then they just decide to go and box and coast it. It could lead to a boring fight.
Yeah, because they can just run the whole last round.
Exactly, and that's, at the end of the day, people want to be entertained. People are paying a lot of money at times to get floor seats and tickets, hard-earned money to see that, and they want to be entertained. They want to put on an entertaining fight. So when they see something like that, it's something where they leave a bad taste in their mouth, and they don't want to go and see that fighter again. So, I like the mystery too. When we get to a decision, if we know a guy's been blowing out another guy, or if he's ahead, it kind of takes away from the decision too, as well. So, on second thought, actually, that to me is like one of the biggest dramas in boxing, is when they go to the scorecards, you never really know. And of course, it could be a bad thing, because we never know about these scores from the judges. But in a good competitive fight, you're on the tips of your toes. You don't know who's going to get the nod. And I think open scoring takes away from that too.
I know we want to be entertained. When do you think we're going to get boxing back?
Man, who knows? This thing's serious, man. They've canceled fights. PBC just sent out an email saying that fights in May have been pushed back. It depends on the spread of this thing, and man, I don't think for the foreseeable future, to be honest. Maybe in July, somewhere around there, I hope, but from what I'm reading, this thing is going to take a little longer than what people are initially had expected. So I don't think we're going to get boxing in the next few months.
What have you got planned for yourself? Obviously, you're self-employed. Obviously, you have Fight Hub. And what are you going to try to do to try and get some content in these next few weeks and maybe even months?
I got to be creative, man. I got to be creative. And, there's a few things that I've been wanting to do for a while that I finally now have the time to do it. I've been balancing making content because I still have a lot of interviews that I haven't released that I've just been holding on to because I've been so busy. Now that I'm going through them and able to release them, but I've been trying to play catch up also as well with my personal life and getting stuff caught up with as well. So I think during this time, a lot of content creators have to be creative, have to sit down and really write what they want to do for their channel or like what they've always wanted to do, because now we have all the time in the world to do it. I look this as an opportunity, a great opportunity to do those things. And I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about there's no events, because I know I could come up with some stuff. People are home wanting to get content. So I'm not too worried about it, because there's a lot of stuff that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time. But really, that's what a content creator should be doing, is always thinking of new ways to make awesome content for people. And that applies not only to us, but to the actual, and I say actual YouTube creators, content creators, because, we put out interviews and sound bites and stuff like that, but YouTube as a greater whole, those guys are coming up with, vlogs that involve them doing crazy stuff or tutorials, comedy sketches. It's the biosphere of YouTube is very diverse, and those content creators have been just holed up, just creating. So I think you're going to get a lot of interesting. I've already started to see it. Things coming out. You're going to get a lot of, and this happens a lot of clickbaity stuff with clickbaity titles to try to get traffic because, people don't have any events to go to and they start coming up with stuff. But I think as a whole, this is really a good time for content creators to get creative and put out great content.
How do you think it's going to affect the boxing landscape as a whole? Obviously, a lot of the boxers are self-employed. Boxing's their main income. Some of the smaller promoters, like Lou DiBella, Thompson's Boxing, they're not going to have any source of income for however long this lasts.
Those guys are going to be fine, man. Those promoters are going to be fine because those promoters more than likely are all millionaires and have all done really, really well and are wealthy. The boxers in general, I would think, majority of them are going to be fine if they saved up their money. You really got to worry about those middle card boxers or those journeymen. Those are the ones that are going to be suffering, that have to still work full-time jobs while doing boxing on the side. Those are the guys that are going to suffer. I think overall, though, everybody's going to be well because, they're wealthy. They're all wealthy. They all make good money. And yeah, if they haven't saved, it's going to affect them. But, and you never know with fighters. They do at times have a tendency to go through their money really quick because of the lifestyle that they live. And it's warranted. They've worked really hard to live that lifestyle, and why not? If you're making the money and you've worked hard, that's one way to reward it. I would say just, save up your money and don't live as lavishly. But I think overall, those people are going to be fine. Maybe some of the smaller promoters might take a hit with their actual business. They might go under or it really affect them. But I think the individuals as a whole, will be fine. It's more of the smaller people involved with those organizations, the PR people, the logistics people that need these events to feed their families. Those are the ones that are going to be affected by this. And, that's the thing. A lot of them are 1099s, independent contractors. They can't apply for unemployment. A lot of them are living check to check. So, I do worry about those guys because there's a lot of people that work in boxing that work as independent contractors. And, they're living off event and stuff like that. So, yeah, it is going to be hard for them in these next few months.
It's crazy times when we're watching computer-generated Muhammad Ali against Evander Holyfield on the World Boxing Super Series.
Yeah, man, I saw that. And I was like, what is this guy doing? What the heck? Is this like a real thing? Like that he's putting on YouTube? And then I saw it and I was like, what the heck? Like, I have fight night. I might as well just start doing this too. But yeah, like when I saw that, I'm like, at first I was just like, wait, how did he go and hire a company to make a computer simulation? And then I'm like, no, he's just using fight night. And I'm like, dude, all right, like whatever, there's tough times, you got to come up with stuff. Like what I said, you got to be creative. And it's funny, I thought about doing that stuff like 3-4 years ago, but back then it was a lot harder to film a video game on your laptop and upload it to YouTube as it is now. Now it's super easy, but back then it was really hard. So I thought it just was too time consuming to do it. But yeah, it got me thinking about maybe doing something like that too now.
That's it. You said you were looking for content, so just be creative.
Good content. That's the thing. Good content. You got to be creative, but put out good content.
All right, Marcos, I just want to thank you again for your time, for joining us today. And if you want to plug your YouTube, your Instagram, and your Twitter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, man, go ahead and give me a follow, everybody, at Hey, It's Marcos V, MARCOSV. Hey, It's Marcos V on Twitter and on the Instagrams. And of course, our YouTube channel keeps you in the know in the world of boxing. Fight Hub TV on YouTube. We got content almost daily. Interviews, videos, workout videos. If you're a boxing fan, we have everything for you in the boxing sphere as well. So yeah, youtube.com/fight hub. And you can catch me when we have fights hopefully soon on Fox as the unofficial ringside score.
Thanks again, Marcos, and I'm sure you'll catch you at another event whenever they open up.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right, bye. Thanks again to Marcos Villegas from Fight Hub for joining us today. We'll hopefully be back next week, myself and Danny Z, trying to find some sort of content to get you through these crazy times with the coronavirus. Don't forget to catch us at The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And once again, this is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round.